can't finish it. That's kind of the point of this whole thing. So there was some huge breaking news this morning. Joe Kent, that is our Director of National Intelligence, of Counterterrorism, just formally resigned from his position, citing opposition to this illegal war. Now, I want you to know, in case you don't follow Joe Kent, maybe you don't follow politics that closely, maybe you're never a Republican, Joe Kent is not just a random person who got the job without proper qualifications. This is not like a Nepo baby, right? This isn't like Jared Kushner going around the world negotiating on Trump's behalf and going, how are you qualified to do this? Joe Kent has actually served this country honorably. And just by way of background, in case you're not familiar with his backstory, while serving in Syria in January of 2019, Joe Kent, his wife, Shannon Kent, his late wife, lost her life to a suicide bomber. They met serving, and they got married, and they had 2 kids. Shannon was the first female combat death in Syria since combat operations began against ISIS. And she was also the first female U.S. service member that was killed by enemy fire in more than 3 years up until that point. And as you can see, she left behind her 2 children with Joe, just 3 years old at the time. The other was 18 months old at the time. Devastating story, right? And I share that with you because I want you to understand that Joe Kent is both professionally and personally qualified to give his opinion on the threat of overseas terror, whether or not it is worth American lives, to send American lives over there. And he addressed his letter, as he should, to the president. That is who he serves. And this is what he wrote. He wrote, President Trump, after much reflection, I have decided to resign from my position as the Director of National Counterterrorism Center, effective today. I cannot, in good conscience, support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. I support the values and the foreign policies that you campaigned on in 2016, 2020, 2024, which you enacted in your first term. Until June of 2025, you understood that the wars in the Middle East were a trap that robbed America of the precious lives of our patriots and depleted the wealth and prosperity of our nation. In your first administration, you understood better than any modern president how to decisively apply military power without getting us drawn into never-ending wars. You demonstrated this by killing Qasem Soleimani and by defeating ISIS. Early in this administration, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform and sowed pro-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran. This echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States and that should you strike now, there was a clear path to a swift victory. This was a lie, and is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women. We cannot make this mistake again. As a veteran who deployed to combat 11 times, and as a Gold Star husband who lost my beloved wife Shannon in a war manufactured by Israel, I cannot support sending the next generation off to fight and die in a war that serves no benefit to the American people, nor justifies the cost of American lives. I pray that you will reflect upon what we are doing in Iran and who we are doing it for. The time for bold action is now. You can reverse course and chart a new path for our nation, or you can allow us to slip further toward decline and chaos. You hold the cards. It was an honor to serve in your administration and to serve our great nation. Yeah, this is a very big deal. It is a very big deal. It is remarkable. It is brave. It is the honorable thing to do. It is why I have been also signaling to troops, this is, you should not serve. They don't care about your life. It's very obvious. You can legally and conscientiously object to a war. This is an illegal war. The entire world is responding to Trump and saying, this is an illegal war. Why are you doing this? And he is just saying, well, we're in a habit. This is what we do. We bomb Muslim children. And so listening to that and listening to me tell you what Joe Kent's story and background is, literally his wife paid the ultimate sacrifice. You would imagine that President Trump would take this seriously, right? So I'll ask you rhetorically, how do you think President Donald Trump responded to this public resignation? Right? How do you think Trump views someone who served 11 combat tours overseas, whose wife gave the ultimate sacrifice to this nation. Okay, I'll let you take a listen to how he responded.
Your director of national counterterrorism, Joe Kent, he just resigned today. He said he can't support your conflict with Iran. What's your reaction to that? And did you?
Well, I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security. I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized that it's a good thing that he's out, because he said that Iran was not a threat. Iran was a threat. Every country realized what a threat Iran was. The question is whether or not they wanted to do something about it. And many people, many of the greatest military scholars are saying for years that presidents should have taken out Iran because they wanted a nuclear weapon. They were, if we didn't do the attack, or if, I'll go a step further, if I didn't terminate the Iran nuclear deal given to us, one of the worst deals ever made by Barack Hussein Obama. Remember when they sent Boeing 757s over there, loaded with cash, hundreds of millions of dollars? You would have been very happy. This was a wonderful. They sent hundreds of millions. People forget that. Does anybody remember? Right? You remember hundreds of millions of dollars in a Boeing 757. I think they had two of them loaded. They took the seats out and they put cash. And it was so much that there wasn't a bank in Virginia, Maryland, or D.C. that had any money left. They stripped them of all their money, put it into place, sent it to Iran, almost as ransom. That's not going to happen with Trump. And nobody ever did anything about it. Nobody ever said anything. Can you imagine if I did that? So they've been a threat for a long time. But they've really been a threat. If I didn't terminate Obama's horrible deal that he made, the Iran nuclear deal, you would have had a nuclear war 4 years ago. You would have had nuclear holocaust, and you would have had it again if we didn't bomb the site.
Just rambling. First and foremost, calling somebody who's been deployed 11 times weak, or actually understanding what that means, right? To understand what it means, like I said, you can have bots on the internet, but you cannot make bots suit up and put boots on the ground and go fight your wars. Okay, Joe Kent did that. So he has an understanding of what it means to put people in harm's way and for them to be willing to die for the country's security. So his measure is going to be infinitely more precise than Trump's is, right? To them, they're playing like Monopoly. Right, they like figurines on a board. They don't care. Okay, how many do we need out here? Okay, how many? They're playing Battleship. It's not real. It's not real because they have never had any true stake in the game. Right? They don't have any skin in the game. Does he have sons who know how to shoot? Yeah, actually, Don does. Eric does. Why doesn't he deploy them? If he needs all these troops and it's so obvious, and it's so clear, and it's so moral, why are you throwing it back to something that you did which did not involve troops on the ground? You're talking about reversing a policy for security, which is what Joe Kent is saying. There is no imminent threat with Iran. And because he can't articulate one, he just throws it back to Obama, who did have a bad policy, by the way, which is a policy that I believe should have been reversed, by the way. But what does that have to do with what he just asked you? What are we doing in Iran right now? I'm glad he's gone. I'm glad he's gone. I like to be surrounded by people who lie to me. Exactly what Charlie had intimated in those messages with Brett Weinstein. That if you're close to him, if you're in his ear, that's why they're constantly around him. They create this side of hive mentality. Everybody thinks this. No, this is going to be amazing.